Why no one wants to host the Olympics.
It's September 2017, and members of the International Olympic Committee are gathered to pick the city that will host the 2024 Olympic Games. The biggest decision this group makes. They've put representatives from the two competing cities on stage for their announcement.
With the unanimous decision we took,
but everyone here already knows who won.
Please raise your hand.
Every 4 years, more than 5 million people attend the Olympics, and over 3 billion watch it on TV.
Doesn't the country that actually gets the Olympics typically lose money on it because of how much money they invest? They actually don't get that money back. I think Freakonomics did an analysis on this. Yes, countries that host the Olympics typically lose money as costs frequently exceed initial budgets, and projected revenues. And apparently they have to sometimes do things like spent $150 million on its failed bid. So they spent $150 million, I presume, to make the city look pretty enough to be able to host the Olympics, and then they weren't picked. Not only if you get picked is it super expensive, but if you don't get picked, it's also super expensive. There's probably an argument that like if you get picked and then tourism might increase over the next few years because you get to showcase how beautiful your country is. I imagine that could potentially happen, but I know at least in the year that the Olympics happen, countries that host it actually tend to lose far more than they gain by all the tourism.
It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity for one city to show off, and the competition has typically been fierce. 12 cities applied to host the 2004 Games before the IOC picked Athens, Greece. 10 applied for 2008, won by Beijing, China. But since then, interest has been waning. 9 cities applied for 2012, then 7, then 5, and for 2024, only 2 were left when it was time for a vote.
Which I guess kind of makes sense, because what are you even getting? It's extraordinarily expensive, extraordinarily difficult. I mean, it's a logistical nightmare, and then you don't actually even really get anything by being selected. Sure, you get to host the Olympics, but kind of that doesn't mean that much. Everyone's hosted the Olympics at this point.
So the IOC did something it's never done before.
Paris 24, Los Angeles 28.
IOC was so concerned that
LA is already a hellscape of traffic and crime. I am not convinced that putting the Olympics there is going to help anything. I think it's going to be rough. Every streamer that I know or that I've heard from, they all hate LA, presumably because of the traffic and the heat, and there's massive amounts of drug problems, housing unaffordability, et cetera, with people thinking that the Olympics is going to make all of that worse, because now you've got millions of people in an already crowded city trying to get into the city. Like, this is not going to improve the situation.
Nobody would bid to host the games in 2028, that it simultaneously awarded the games 2024 to Paris and 2028 to Los Angeles. There used to be strong demand to host. Now there isn't.
They really just kicked the can down the road, really, because in 2028, they're going to have to go for the PIDs for 2032, and nobody's going to apply.
The Olympics are the most prestigious sports event.
What happens if nobody decides to host the Olympics? Do they just end? No country wants to host the Olympics. The games could not be held. But the IOC will likely try and make significant changes to encourage future hosting, such as implementing a permanent host city or having multiple countries share the games. That almost makes sense to me, because a lot of the things you build for the Olympics are one-time use, and then they never get used again. So having 3 or 4 that you rotate between, you could maybe like swap out other countries if one country doesn't want to do it anymore. That seems reasonable. I'm thinking behemoth cities like Shanghai, China, Tokyo in Japan, New York City, United States, like cities that have the potential for the infrastructure, and that way it's not just going to waste afterwards.
In the world. Why doesn't anyone want to host it anymore? So the Olympics have actually had this problem before. They originally came up with this idea of rotating the games around to different cities back in 1896 because they had to.
We didn't have international jet travel, and we didn't have international telecommunications.
Andrew Zimbalist wrote a book about the economics of hosting sports mega events like the Olympics.
So it was necessary in order to spread the games internationally and get the whole world to participate and enjoy them.
As the games grew, the IOC kept this tradition, eventually developing a competition where cities would submit bids and it would vote on a winner. But when it opened bidding for the 1984 games, not a single city wanted to host because the last few hadn't gone very well.
Oh, so this has already happened before, where they just didn't host, nobody wanted to host because it costs too much and gives you too little.
Local political protests had turned violent during the 1968 games in Mexico City, and terrorists killed 11 Israeli athletes at the 72 Munich Games.
What? Olympic athletes just got gunned down in the streets? How have I never heard about this? I had always just assumed that Olympians have some kind of a diplomatic immunity for the countries that they go to, because otherwise I start getting hosted in places like China, which have far more human rights violations. It just seems like it's really dangerous. Or if you have had an anti-China sentiment and you become an Olympian, like probably you don't want to go to China, because what if you get arrested there on some bogus charge? It's insane to me that there was not enough security to prevent Olympians from being assassinated.
Invade the Olympic Village, taking 9 Israeli athletes hostage and killing 2 others in their room.
Both incidents showed cities that hosting could be politically risky, or even deadly. When construction problems and corruption led Montreal to spend more than 13 times their budget, they began to view it as
13 times? Brother, fire your project managers. 13 times? If I was going to build a house and let's say I build a house miraculously, it's going to cost me $100,000, the builder says. And then he comes back a week later. He's like, actually, so we spent $1.3 million on the house. Like, brother, you're gone and I'm suing. What?
financially risky too. So in the late 70s, the IOC was barreling towards disaster until one city offered to save them.
USA, USA.
Under one condition: Los Angeles did not want to spend a lot of money. To do that, it offered to use venues it already had instead of build new ones. The LA Coliseum, where the USC football team played, the Forum, where the Lakers played, UCLA's gymnasium and tennis center, and the athletes could just stay in the college dorm rooms. Since the IOC didn't have
Imagine becoming an Olympian athlete on the biggest international stage to ever exist, and then you have like 22-year-old college frat boys next to you.
a choice, it said yes, and was soon glad it did. The '84 LA Games were a success in almost every
I don't know about the shorts, brother.
way, but especially financially. It only cost around $1 billion in 2015 dollars, and LA even made a profit. This should have become
Sorry, is this a graph of how much? Yeah, how much it cost versus how much they made? Look at that. Who hosted it in 1980 that lost what? 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 times their budget? Moscow, Soviet Union. Oh, well, maybe I'm not that upset about it, actually.
in 2015 dollars, and LA even made a profit. This should have become the model for future Olympic host cities, but instead, it sparked the problem that is plaguing the Olympics today. LA did such a good job hosting the 1984 Olympics that it re-inspired cities to want to host again. For the 1992 games, 6
It's crazy that cities were inspired to host again because they were like, look how well LA did it. They used stuff they already had. They actually made a profit. Everyone enjoyed it. It was a success all around. And then what we should do is copy none of that. What we're going to do is go back to the old way of spending too much money and not making any money. Why did they not look at how LA did it by not changing anything that they already had and decide, oh, so we're actually not going to build anything. We're just going to use the infrastructure that we already had. Nobody learned a thing from this.
cities submitted bids, then 6 again for 96, 8 for 2000, then a whopping 11 for 2004. As more cities competed, the IOC regained leverage over them again. But instead of sticking to the LA model, it began demanding more. Between 1992
Oh, so the old people in the IOC f***ed it up. That's what it sounds like.
and 2020, the IOC added dozens of new sports to the games.
I see. The more sports you have, the more places you need and the more different arena types you have to be able to support all of them. That actually kind of makes sense as to what it is. If you have like 12 sports, you only need 12 individual arenas in which they have to perform. But if you have 20 sports, well, now you have to build 8 more. And I'm not even like opposed to these. Some of these are pretty cool. I don't know what Invasion Games is, but dance, gym, those seem pretty good to me. I can see why they're being added because it makes it more interesting, but I can also see why countries are like, well, hold on, we don't have the infrastructure or the money for that, and now they're backing out again.
This required more venues and housing for more athletes, which host cities were primarily responsible for paying for. As the competition intensified, cities felt increasing pressure to make their bids more attractive. The most effective way to do that was to build new venues. Sydney built 15 new venues plus housing for 10,000 athletes. Athens built 22 new venues.
Sydney built that many venues and that much housing for athletes, but cannot build affordable housing for its citizens? Wild. I would be so mad if I was an Australian.
Beijing built 12. All of this construction made hosting the games really, really expensive. This chart shows how the cost of the games skyrocketed over the last 30 years, reaching between $10 and $25 billion.
Brother, what? Holy crap. Look at that. That's crazy. 2020 costs, what is that? 5 times as much as as the year 2000? Crazy.
In the last decade.
I want to add one big caveat to this chart, though. It only includes sports-related costs to the games. It doesn't include things like new public transportation or development projects that most all these cities spent money on for the Olympics. If we include some of those costs, these bars are actually way higher. So for example, some estimate that Beijing spent more like $45 billion for their 2008 Summer Games. Russia spent more like $51 in 2014, and Tokyo's bill is more like $35 billion. No matter what number you use, though, all of these cities went way over their initial budget, which the bidding process incentivizes them to keep artificially low.
What they have to do is make initial statements about the intentions and the plans that are very reduced. Once the politicians say, yeah, okay, we'll go along with this, then they start adding the bells and whistles. And those can be very, very substantial.
So it's about like government contracting where you're like, oh no, I can build this whatever government thing it is, database, airplanes, ships, what have you, for X amount of dollars. And as soon as you win the contract because you bid the lowest, well, then you just jack up the price and you're like, well, we went over budget and now it's actually, twice as much as it was before. It's the same thing. You give an artificially low number so that all the politicians can say, we're going to make so much money off of this. It's only going to cost us $10 billion. And then you actually do the building and it's like, oopsie daisy, it was $35 billion, but sorry, my bad.
New cities generate from ticket sales, TV contracts, and sponsorships only cover a fraction of these costs, meaning these governments and really their taxpayers are on the hook for the rest.
So it doesn't look like a good economic deal.
But host cities have known for decades that they'll likely lose money in the short term.
It's actually crazy to me that at the drop of a hat, these countries' governments are willing to spend between, 25 and $45 billion to build infrastructure that's going to be used a couple of times, but they absolutely refuse to build more houses to make a housing more affordable for their citizens. Imagine how much affordable housing you could build with $45 billion. I'm not talking about supplementing housing because that's different, but actually building houses. A $45 billion contract to a huge builder in the United States solves the housing crisis for probably most major cities.
Instead, many have been told that hosting the Olympics is an investment that will pay off in the future.
Okay, so this is the IOC's webpage where they list the benefits of hosting the games. And they use this word legacy a lot. And by legacy, they mean things that will continue to benefit your city long after the Olympics are over.
Take sports facilities. Beijing justified spending around $460 million on this new 90,000-seat stadium by planning for a local pro soccer team to use it after the Olympics. London did the same when it built this stadium. At first, seems like a good idea. Other legacy projects are meant to benefit even more people. Russia spent $8.7 billion on a new rail and highway link into Sochi for its Winter Games. And Rio de Janeiro spent $4 billion on a new subway line connecting a beach community to its Olympic Center. The most commonly touted legacy benefit is that hosting an Olympics is a great way to kickstart your city's growth.
What historically came out of the public relations with regard to the Olympics was that this was the most wonderful thing that could ever happen to a city. It puts your city on the world map, so it will increase tourism, it will increase commerce, it will increase foreign investment. And that story turns out not to be true.
Well, yeah, because I can't actually name any of the cities that the Olympics are hosted in. I can just name the countries. Like I know Paris did it in 2024, and in 2020, couldn't tell you Russia maybe. Then I know China did it before that. Like I can only tell you what country it was, but I already knew all of those countries. I don't think I'm more likely to go to a country because the Olympics were hosted there, unless it was to view all the facilities that the Olympics actually built for the games.
Let's start with tourism. A 2004 study found that after experiencing a bump in tourism leading up to their respective games, Atlanta, Sydney, and Seoul all saw it fall afterwards. In his book,
Fall below baseline? Atlanta, back to where it was. Sydney, same. Seoul. Dang. People really don't care after 2 years. Again, that probably has to do with the fact that nobody remembers the city. Like, I couldn't tell you that Seoul and Barcelona hosted them.
Sydney, and Seoul all saw it fall afterwards. In his book, Andrew cites a 1996 study on 3 Olympic Winter Games that found that the long-term impact on tourism was between non-existent and very modest, and a 2010 study that found little evidence of any benefit to tourism of hosting an Olympic Games, and considerable evidence of damage. In other words, being on TV can backfire.
If the weather is particularly too warm, or if it's too cold. If there are security incidents, if there are bad stories about the traffic, that some cities are able to maybe help their image, but other cities are hurting their image.
Many legacy infrastructure investments haven't paid off either.
I suspect that's going to be what happens in LA. Everyone's going to see that it's like really hot there and the traffic is terrible. And that's going to make people not want to go, which again, totally makes sense. And hopefully that'll be the push LA needs to actually like get stuff done and improve. I think it could be an amazing city. So much potential there, but really it's just too unaffordable, too crowded, et cetera, et cetera. It's got so many problems.
Russia's rail project is now considered an epic failure. And Andrew argues that while Rio's subway line benefits some residents, what the city really needed was a line serving the lower income neighborhoods inland. But that's not where the Olympics were.
The typical case was that the IOC comes along and they say, we need these 30 venues. We want you to put them in a way so that transportation is facilitated and other conveniences are allowed. And so what the city would have to do is contort itself in order to accommodate the IOC.
Empty stadiums are a particularly visible sign of this mismatch. That Beijing Stadium had about 80,000 more seats than what the local soccer team could fill. So it backed out.
And it only had 90,000 seats, by the way. So that means 80 out of 90,000 seats would have been vacant. Not great planning. Are 90,000 people going to soccer games outside of like European countries where it's super popular?
Now the stadium sits mostly empty, costing the city some $10 million a year to maintain. This is what's called a white elephant. And there are now dozens of them across Olympic host cities. These are venues left over from the Athens 2004 games. And ESPN found that 12 out of 27 venues in Rio de Janeiro had not held an event a year after it hosted the Olympics. For many residents, white elephants are evidence that hosting the games is a waste of money.
The idea that had been out there forever and ever, this is wonderful news for the city. They get to do.
And also think of like the opportunity cost. Yeah, it costs $10 million a year to maintain, which is taxpayer money that's not going to anything, literally not going to a single thing that benefits anybody. But also, what are you giving up by having a gigantic facility in the middle of downtown that nobody can use? That could be a shopping mall. It could be a factory for a company. It could be housing for people. Like it could be so many things. Not only are you actively losing money on the front end, you don't have anything that could be so much better on the back end. You're being hit from both sides.
No, more often than not, it's going to be the opposite.
By 2015, city residents were ready to do something about it. The IOC had 6 cities bidding for the 2024 games until protests forced Boston and Hamburg to drop out. A new mayor in Rome fulfilled a promise to shut down its bid. Then more than 260,000 people signed a petition that led Budapest to drop out as well. It left the IOC with just 2 bidders, and once again, little leverage. The IOC has since passed reforms that it says reduce the cost of hosting, largely by requiring hosts to use existing and temporary venues, like LA did back in 1984, and allowing them to partner with other cities. As of now, Paris doesn't look like it will blow its budget, and LA's organizing committee is saying that the city can again pull off an on-budget Olympics. But
this is also the same place that has spent $15 billion on a railroad that has only just started. Crazy. Of course they're going to say they're on budget. California has never been on budget for anything.
The question is, if they do, could it spark another bidding war?
I don't know if we'll go into a big cycle like we did after the 84 games. I do think it's possible that there'll be a small turn. It'll appear less undesirable than it has.
The IOC has also stopped taking bids and instead negotiates with cities privately. It picked Milan and Cortina, Italy, over Stockholm for the 2026 Winter Games, and it gave Brisbane, Australia, the 2032 Summer Games. But some are arguing for a more permanent solution.
I think it's perfectly plausible to think about building the Olympic Shangri-La with its 35 or 40 venues for the Summer Games, a smaller number for the Winter Games, in one place.
Some believe Greece, the historical home of the Olympics, would make a good permanent host. Others have mentioned LA since it has so many venues and has done so well in the past. A permanent spot would eliminate white elephant projects, save cities from going into debt, and reduce the game's environmental footprint. But it could also reduce much of the excitement around each new Olympics.
It's not
part of the cool thing about the Olympics is whatever country it's hosted in, you get to see amazing culture. Like the Chinese games where you get to see on display the traditional dances that they're doing and the homages to their culture. Like that's so awesome. I have vivid memories of the Chinese games and how amazing it was. If you just host in one place, that's harder to do. Like sure, you could host a Chinese themed game and have the whatever Chinese Olympic Committee, whoever they are, come in and do the performance in LA. But I feel like something is lost when you do that. However, as far as practicality goes, I feel like that is probably the way to go, because otherwise it just becomes unsustainable.
It's not going to be easy to go to a model that makes environmental sense and economic sense. But I do think it makes sense to talk about it and put it out there as someplace that we should be heading.
Depending on how the next few Olympics go, it might be the only direction left.
That was a great video. Why No One Wants to Host the Olympics by Search Party. Thanks for watching.